Welcome to Last Neanderthals podcast. My name is Khushal Yusufzai.
And my name is Wali Khan. You may not know us yet, but that doesn't really matter. All you need to know is we are the Last Neanderthals. We are dedicated to having interesting and engaging conversations with individuals who have a lot of experience and an immense amount of knowledge. We hope to learn from these people and grow as human beings. We want you to listen and grow with us too. So come along the journey and evolve with us. Welcome to this episode of the Last Neanderthals podcast. Today we spoke to Amna Baig, one of the very few female police officers in Pakistan and also a master's student at Oxford. We spoke to Amna about gender inclusivity, feminism, and the struggles women face in Pakistan, especially regarding law enforcement, as she is currently a superintendent in the police force. Amna shared her incredible journey with us and we learned so much. We hope you learn a lot from this conversation as well. Please remember to follow, subscribe, all of that. Thank you so much for tuning in. But why did you want to become a police officer?
So growing up, I was always told that a socially acceptable career for women was either to be a doctor or a teacher. Everything else was for men. When I grew up, I traveled, I realized that it was perfectly fine for me to walk into a police station in another country. Now that I have joined the police service, I understand it has nothing to do with my gender. Gender inequality does not have a one-stop solution. One of the things that we should be discussing more in Pakistan is this structural form of violence. If a woman is educated, she's improving the life standard of the whole household, not just herself. We also need to focus on telling women what their rights are.
Is the law from top up, is it strong enough?
Laws are there. The women are kept away from accessing the justice system.
Your mother chose to raise a family instead of any career prospects. Do you think one is better than the other?
It should be an option. That's my only response to this. It should be a complete option.
Let's end it on this deep question. What would you want written on your tombstone?
I think I would want a Urdu sher, which is Mauj hai darya mein aur bairune darya kuch nahi.
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
That's for you to Google and check.
I really want to know what a Hunza is actually like.
I think it's one of the most beautiful places in Pakistan. It is extremely beautiful, not just the terrain and the geography of it, but also the people. So I think it's a jewel in Pakistan.
Yeah, it is beautiful I've not been ever, but from the pictures and videos I've seen, it looks amazing. And I think that's one thing people don't realize about Pakistan. There's so many beautiful places, like Swat, where we're from, is so beautiful as well. Did you spend much time in Hunza?
Oh, no, actually. So my father was a civil servant and we used to do back and forth. I was there for summers mostly, but because he was posted across Punjab and the capital city of Islamabad. So we lived most of our lives there. So I started off school in, I'd say, southern Punjab, Dera Ghazi Khan. He was posted there. And then we moved around. Then we went to Islamabad and I completed my education there.
What was your education like in Pakistan?
So I went to government schools all my life. That's what my father could afford. He could not afford private education. So I went to government schools. But I'm very happy that I did. It gave me a lot of perspective on life. It gave me a lot of perspective on things. And also it made me realize that, what do we need to do in order to improve that? So I did my metric in Rawalpindi, and then I did my FA in Rawalpindi, and then I joined NUST, the National University of Science and Technology, for an undergrad. And right after my undergrad, I sat the civil service exam.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. And you were telling us earlier that in your family, there wasn't so much of a stigma of women doing uniform jobs. Why was that?
So we're from Hunza and there's 100% literacy rate in that area of Pakistan. And yes, I'm not the first. It surprises me at times when I sit down for interviews and when I speak to people and they're like, "Oh wow, this is so cool! You wear the uniform." I'm like, "Oh, I'm not the first one in my family to do that." One of my cousins, she is a fighter pilot with the Pakistan Air Force. The other one of my aunts was with the Provincial Police Service in Gilgit-Baltistan. So I'm the third one. It's a small area, but I'd say very literate and enlightened.
Why do you think that is? Because it's quite secluded. It looks like beautiful, countryside. People would think that no one would be educated there.
Yeah. I think it has a lot to do with the community over there, the people over there. They're very, very, I'd say, modern in their thought process. The community just comes together and, focuses on what the requirements and the needs of the community are. They do not hold back the women from getting an education. In fact, they encourage it so much. They make sure that all the children in the house, not just the boys, but the girls as well, are educated. They also make sure and try that the women are empowered enough to take up jobs or start a business. So if you walk down in a busy street in Hunza, you'd see women running shops on their own. So it's the culture and the thought process of the, I'd say, community, which is reflective of the fact that women over there are so empowered, I'd say.
See, like, I bet a lot of Pakistanis don't have any idea that there are regions like this in the northern side of Pakistan where women are running shops. Because when you look at, like, how you said Swat is beautiful, but if you put in Swat Valley into Google, it comes up with Taliban and the terrible things that have happened there. And what I wanted to ask is, how can we make people aware of these communities that exist there in order to inspire other Pashtuns or other patriarchal societies that I think the Pashtuns tend to be seen as more as patriarchal, encourage them that there are like communities like them that encourage their daughters, and it causes more good than harm.
Absolutely, Khushal. I think like one of the things that I'd want to talk about in detail is this very thing that you just mentioned, right? Like, so we need to, when we talk about women empowerment, we need to see it we need to tell people that, it brings in the benefits for the whole community, not just for the women. In fact, I see if a woman is educated and she's earning money for the household, she's improving the life standard of the whole household, not just herself, right? So eventually, if all women are working, it's improving the economic situation of the community, and that's how we need to see it. I think it's all about perceptions, and I think it's about mindsets, and we need to change that. And one way of doing that is by setting examples and breaking stereotypes. And as you mentioned, we need to talk more about the benefits of educating women and empowering them, rather than other things that you just mentioned. So I think another important thing in this is that we need to understand where it comes from. And I'd be talking about, direct forms of violence that women face in Pakistan in terms of gender-based violence. But we also need to talk about another very important aspect of violence, which is the structural form of violence, right? And we need to tell people what it is. And there's not enough conversation around that. And I'd want to highlight that structural form of violence is the form of violence which is ingrained in the structures of the society. And because it's so ingrained in the structures that you do not see it. And what that is doing is it's keeping women from their potential. So, for example, if there's a household and a girl child is not allowed to get an education after a certain point, but a boy child is, even though the household has resources to do the same for both, and they're not doing that, what is that? That's structural form of violence. You're keeping a woman from her potential. And because of whatever set mindset there is in this, which is keeping the father or whoever is deciding for the households from keeping the women from education, it is eventually making that woman not reach her potential. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not about resources anymore. It's just about the mindsets. And I think one of the things that we should be discussing more in Pakistan is this structural form of violence. We need to question the structures that are there, which are keeping women from their potential. And these structures are in our culture. These structures in getting the woman married early. It's worrying about her dowry than her education. making sure that a boy in the house gets to have all the opportunities and the girl child doesn't. So all of these things, which are then again, and the problem, I mean, I think it's a terrible thing. The direct form of violence, gender-based violence, direct form of violence is a terrible, terrible thing. But at least people come about and condemn it. But with the structural form of violence, the problem is that nobody's even condemning it. They're just accepting it as, a norm.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think they see it as accept it as a norm? Is it because they don't think it's an issue in itself, or they just don't see it at all?
I think uh, uh, I think patriarchy is all about power imbalance, right? So there two three genders, and there's a big power imbalance around the dynamics of those genders when they interact with each other. And the power imbalance, one way of keeping the other genders suppressed or repressed is to, keep them away from their potential. That's how I see it. You know how we have these things where they're like, oh, if a woman gets more education, she'll responding back to what we are saying. Or if she start earning her own money, she would shun us for what we are doing to her. So I think, like, to keep that power balance, or to keep that power imbalance actually, the patriarchal setups just make sure that these norms stay and they do not give equal opportunity to women.
That does make a lot of sense, because in patriarchy the men are drunk on power.
Yeah.
Why would they let that power go?
Nobody wants to let
Yeah,
power go easily.
So they is like
Yeah.
becoming corrupted by power.
Yeah.
What do you think is the best way of solving that? Like, is it by having more role models? Or do you think these people are also in echo chambers where they don't see societies where women have rights, where they can get education, all of these things, and how they thrive? Because you got to show them, how to look at things a different way. So how can we go about doing that?
I think, like, one of the most important things that we need to understand is that gender inequality does not have a one-stop solution. So we can't say that if we do this, it'll be fixed. If we do that, it'll be fixed. No, it's a social issue. And when we talk about a social issue, we need to understand that a lot of things feed into that society, right? So we need to work on a lot of fronts. So we need to work on the educational front of making sure that women have and girl children have access to good education. We need to work on changing the mindsets of the men around them. We need to work on changing the stereotypes that are around women working, as you mentioned. So it requires, I think, a holistic approach rather than just fixing one thing. However, I feel that whatever we are feeding into that particular solution, every component is important. So breaking stereotypes by setting examples is, again, it's a huge way of changing mindsets. So they're all interlinked, right? And then again, as you said, it's about perception, how we see patriarchy. And if you can show a good example of how a society is educating its children, and its girl children specifically, what benefits it brings to the society, right? And then again, making sure that women not just have not just have the, as I'd say in patriarchy, the consent of the men to do those things, but also access to those opportunities. So the governments need to think about how can they make sure that the girl children, once the parents decide that yes, we need to educate our girl child, or we need her to do a certain thing, does she even have access to those certain resources? So for example, if in a household you go to a community, you educate them about these things, and there's no school nearby, and the parents then again have to think, how are they going to ensure that a girl child does go to a school safe? So it's a holistic, we need to have a very, very holistic approach when we talk about gender inequality.
Yeah, I think one point earlier you made as well was quite interesting about this sort of power imbalance that the men would want to keep. I've always thought it would be more of a structural thing, as you mentioned, but it's very interesting to think of it in the way that these men want to keep like these systems in place. Do you really think that is what it is, or is it more of a subconscious thing, whereas they're not actively thinking, oh, we don't want them to do this, we don't want them to talk back to us? Or is it like in the back of their minds, this is what they're thinking, because that would be quite scary, because then it's like malicious intent instead of just being ignorant and not knowing.
I think both. And I think another important thing that again, I would not want to stereotype again, right? So people have different reasons for that, but particularly largely that's the reason. But I'd say that we need to understand that when we talk about patriarchy, there's this thing called masculinity, right? So I feel so bad for so many men who fall victim to this masculinity, right? So, for example, if a man is struggling at home to earn enough to provide for his family, however, his wife is actually doing a good thing and she's earning more, she's working, she's more educated, whatever the reason. And if she starts earning and a man has to go and live with her in a house that is being paid by that woman, he's being shunned by the patriarchal society. He's been shunned by that masculinity. And we have seen that around us so much. And then it's those men who want to accept that, yes, a woman at times, or at most of the times, do better than me and can bring in money for us to run the households and provide a better living for us. And then the patriarchal mindset and the masculinity, as you talked about, unconsciousness, is constantly telling him that you're failing as a man.
Yeah, and do you know what's the hypocrisy with that? It's like these people use religion, Islam, misuse Islam,
Yeah.
right? But if you look at Khadija,
Yeah.
she was a businesswoman.
Yeah.
She was older than Prophet Muhammad.
Yeah.
She was a businesswoman and she
Yeah.
taught him a lot.
Yeah.
But that goes out the window.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And she had more financial resources than Prophet Muhammad. And it again, we need to understand that religion and culture are two different things. The problem in our country most of the times when we talk about these things is that they couple both of them together and come up with a narrative, which is wrong. So our religion allows women to marry out of choice, but our culture doesn't, and we have so many honor killings, right? So it's the distinction of both. So our religion is very, very, I think it talks about, when it talks about education, ikra, it is for all. It doesn't say the male Muslims should get education, right? So it's so many other things. So it's the misinterpretation of that, and then again coupling that with the culture and forcing down a narrative which is not true. And that's what I'm saying. It's also the men who are suffering because of this masculinity and patriarchy, and they have to give in. And like so many, I'd say, like they come up with names for those men that oh, he's living with his wife is providing for him. So what? What if she's providing a good life for him? But then again, he is being constantly told by the society that you're failing as a man. Right?
Yeah.
So that's wrong.
That's a very interesting point you bring up, and I'm sure we'll delve into that more because it is really important. But we'd also like to know a bit about your journey into becoming a police officer, because I mean, in Pakistan, a female police officer is almost unheard of. I don't think I've actually ever seen myself a female police officer.
I've never spoken to one. You're the first police officer, a lieutenant actually, that I've spoken to.
Thank you.
So
should I take that as a compliment?
Yes, because you got very far in it, like, as well.
Thank you.
And you like we said, role models can inspire many people. If these people had role models where they treated women right, they had healthier activities, like that, we had sports stars, we had let's say for example, a lot of people see the West as enemies, right? But if they had access to these models, they saw like people like Ronaldo, how nice they were, and all these athletes, then the movie telling them that the kuffar wants to kill all of you, that wouldn't really impact them. Do you get what I'm saying? It's like we're in these echo chambers where we don't see these role models as humans.
I think I completely agree with you on the question of having, I won't call it role models. The way I see it is very different, right? So I remember when I joined the police service, I was at an event, and this woman, I wasn't wearing my uniform, of course it was a private event, and this this mother told her girl child that, oh, this auntie, she's a police officer. And you know what the girl child said? She said, no, she can't be a police officer, she's a woman. So it's like, if you're not even telling little girls that this career is for you, or you can be this,
Yeah,
right? You
it's
know what I
not
mean?
possible.
So they don't even grow up knowing that this opportunity exists for them, and it is a career which they can take up if they want. That's what's sad. And just when other times when I'm in my uniform and these fathers bring their young girls and they're like, oh, she was really intrigued and she was interested to know more about you. That is what we need to do. And it's not just with my profession, right? With every profession. So growing up, I never, as such, saw, apart from a few women around me, I was always told that a socially acceptable career for women was either to be a doctor or a teacher, right? Everything else was for men. And if somebody did something different, she was looked down upon. And now that I have joined the police service, I understand it has nothing to do with my gender. I believe, and my other female police officer colleagues are equally competent to do that job, right? So it's just that those young growing children of Pakistan, those young growing children of my country, girl child should know this, that she has this, I'd say, opportunity or avenues for her when she grows up. Not to just think that, oh, I have to grow up to be either married or be a doctor or an engineer, and that's just not even an engineer, mostly teacher. No, she should know that if she wants to do whatever she wants to do, she can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that representation is so important, to see someone like yourself in that position. So trailblazers like you are doing just amazing work. But yeah, again, what was that journey like? Because right now, like, it's unheard of almost. So why did you want to become a police officer in the first place?
I think, like, for this very reason, I'd say. I mean, probably, like, I saw a lot of YouTube documentaries on crime, and I was so interested in that. But no, I think, like, probably for this very reason, like, I mean, it goes back to my childhood, right? So, like, we were allowed as girl children to go to a college. I went to an all girls school and college, right? And we were allowed to get an education in those schools and colleges because it was all girls, right? So, and similarly, if when we were allowed to do go to, for example, a salon, it was all women running, so it was fine for us to go there. But there were certain places which were not fine for us to go because they were being run by men. And when we all have seen in our traditional cultural societies that there's a lot of gender-based violence around us, and most of the times those women do not seek help because they cannot go and seek help because it's considered a taboo for women to access police service. And one of the reasons I always thought was the fact that because only men are police officers, that's why women cannot go to those stations, right? And so a lot of things, those were thoughts when I was a little child. But when I grew up, I traveled, I realized that it was perfectly fine for me to walk into a police station in another country, in a first world country. I could do that. And considering my constitution grants me the right of safety and security, irrespective of my gender, why can't I do that back home? So what if I am in trouble and there is no man around me to help? As the narrative is, right? So what do I do then? And it's a lot of things. And then I jokingly tell everyone as well that I just did not want to get married early, and my mom was like, just get married. So that was my way out.
What was the first step you took? When did you decide, okay, this is what I'm going to do? And what was the first step you took to become a police officer?
I think, like, I'd give a lot of credit to my father. He was a civil servant, and I have 3 brothers, but I have a pair of twins who are now doctors. So my father would always tell me, he's like, "You're the one I see doing this, so you have to do that." So initially, it was always him, giving me the confidence that I required to sit that exam. But yeah, he did. He did give me the confidence that was required to sit that exam, and he told me that it was very possible I could do it. So yeah, it was that, and then again, the fact that, uh, I mean, honestly, it is such a sad thing that I say this, but I always knew that I wanted a life very different from a life of my mother's. Right. So she was a traditional homemaker. No, she did great, but I thought that she was one of the most talented women I know. I still think that. And because she had a traditional marriage, not that it was a bad marriage, it was an excellent marriage, but then again, she did not work, she had to raise children, but that's not the life that I wanted for myself, and I wanted to work. And in that mindset that we had around us, I wanted a career which had social legitimacy. Again, it's such a sad thing I say this, that it was considered, socially unacceptable for women to go and work in corporates in the family that was around me, and the people around me. And again, now times have changed, their minds have changed, but back then that was the thought. So I said that, okay, so what's the way out for me where my parents would be fine with me doing a job which would be acceptable to them? And it was the civil service.
So when you then actually got into civil service, you became a police officer. What was it like working in such a man-dominated field?
Yes, I think like I was surprised myself when I joined the police service, because back then, it's been like now what, 7 years, probably more. Uh, I I I went in with this, like, we all have these preconceived notions about things, and I also had a very major preconceived notion about police service, because only 2% of the women make up the police force back home. And so I was not sure if the my seniors or my undercommand would take me seriously, because I'm a girl. But to my utter surprise, once you wear a uniform, there's no gender. And I again, I'm speaking for myself, but I had an excellent experience. I never, in a single day, I felt that I was not given a certain responsibility because they said that, oh, she's a woman, she can't do that. In fact, I always mostly had dual charge. So yeah, I think, again, massive, shout out to my juniors, my seniors, who had that faith in not just me but also other brilliant female police officers. And we were given the toughest assignments. We were given, like irrespective of our gender, we were supposed to do all the work apart from our own work, look at gender-based violence cases. So we were always bogged down with additional work, because they very very few times you'd find, as you said, female police officer in a jurisdiction or a zone. So if most of the times you'd be the only female police officer in the district, so you'd be looking at your own crimes, but also you'd have the additional responsibility of looking at the crimes related to women of other jurisdictions. So we all, I feel that in that regard, I was utterly surprised, but in a good way.
I wanted to ask, what would you say to a person who doesn't see any point of there being any women officer? Like, what does women bring to the police force that people don't quite understand?
I think like times have changed, Khushal. I mean, like when we joined the police service to now, I mean, massively. Now, senior police officers request for female police officers to be on their team. They would always want female police officers around. And why not? Like, everybody has access to social media. They realize so many of our women are doing such excellent work. Of course, they're going out, they're working, they're getting an education. In all of that, police has an extremely important role, and it's that of the safety of women, right? And understanding that understanding has come to civil servants now. In fact, I'd say that a country like ours, which has a population of 220 million people, 110 million of them are women, right? So how can you, assist that huge population without having women on board. We need to understand that it's a traditional and cultural society where that takes dominance. And for women to have access to these public service delivery units, they require women sitting on the other side. Most of the times we discuss amongst ourselves, and these police colleagues of mine, female police colleagues of mine, and we all say this, like, like our staff around us and also the people around us, they keep telling us that the ratio of female complainants increases massively once they realize that there's a female police officer sitting on the other side, which is a great thing.
So women feel more comfortable reporting their problems
Absolutely.
to a woman.
Absolutely, 110%. That's the case that they feel. And specifically because most of the cases of gender-based violence are of such sensitive nature that they would never open up and discuss it with men. I'll give you an example. So in during COVID, I started using social media early on in my career, and I used to get these messages, hundreds and hundreds of messages from these women across countries talking about the issues that they were facing, right? So that made me realize that there was a vacuum where female police officers are needed, not just on social media, but on ground, where women could just go and approach them and tell them what is wrong. And interestingly, whenever I'd respond to them and I'd tell them that this is the process, this is how you should report, this is the police station, I will connect you to someone over there so you can go, there'll be a female police officer to listen to you. And suddenly they'd be like, no, we do not want to walk into a police station, because there's this taboo and this psychological barrier in regards and in respect to approaching the police, and they'd back off. So I'd realized, because the perception around police is this male dominated institution, that so many women are not accessing justice where they should be, just based off of that.
Is there work being done to change this narrative?
Absolutely. Yeah. We've I think so. Yeah. And that, again, the other thing about this is the fact that more female police officers are not joining the police force. So the numbers have massively increased in the past 4 or 5 years. It's a lot of it's just that women realizing that they can do this. They see other women doing it and they realize that they can do it. More importantly, there's this sense of I'd say responsibility that the senior police officer, male police officers, feel in regards to women. So certain cases, whenever, not just certain cases, but the gender-based violence cases, when they come up, they try and make sure that a female police officer is on that case. So I think times are changing. People have more information now, and that understanding is leading to a lot more access to justice than before.
What I meant was like the young girls. How do we inform the young girls and encourage them to go to police officers, that there are women police officers that can sort you out?
Yeah.
Do you think this is something that...
I think, Khushal, I mean, like, I'd want to talk about something very important here when you say this. And it's so important. And whoever is listening, if a girl is listening to this, and if she feels that she's in a situation where she feels threatened and there's threat to her life and there's some serious threat to her security, I think it's so important for her to realize that please report, right? Like it's coming from because in my service, I have seen from Gujarat to Islamabad, handled some serious important cases as well. In that regard, I've seen, like, I've gone to hundreds of cases of femicide and like domestic violence. And every time I go and speak to the survivors or the victim's family, the first thing I ask them is like, was this the first time she was hurt? And it is never the first time. The woman had gone out, told her parents, her siblings, her friends that this man is beating me, I'm not safe with him. And what they do is they send her back. And what happens is that eventually, because the perpetrator is not being reported to the police, the intervention is not there, she ends up losing her life. And every single case of femicide I've been to, that has been the history. There has been violence that goes unreported. So unreported gender-based violence eventually translates into something very, very serious. And that's why I say that reporting saves lives. We need to report, even if it's a small slap, you go and report it. so that at least the perpetrator knows that what he did was wrong. Because in this whole scenario, nobody ever tells the man that what you're doing is wrong. Again, it goes back to patriarchy and how there's this power imbalance, and they're like, oh, yeah, it's probably the woman's fault. She deserved it.
Do the family members never feel guilt when you do these investigations?
It is the saddest thing. They feel so much guilt once she's not there anymore. But what's the point, right?
Yeah, so it must be very important to reach out to like any family members as well, anyone who's listening. Like if you've been through this, if your family members going through this, just know the risks are severe. It might look like a little thing to you or unimportant, but every little sign is important to take into account.
And another severity of structural violence is that the victim might not even realize that this is normal or not.
You
Like,
know,
y-
it's
y-
so interesting that you brought this up. There have been so many cases where I've gone to, take reports from these women where the hospital has called us and said that, oh, there's this gunshot victim here, and you need to come in and take her report. And when we go to her, or somebody with serious injury, women, and when we speak to her, it is, I've been shocked at times that. But shocked in a way which is depressing to think that the women don't even know that it is a cognizable offense. So when we go to her and ask her that I'm here from the police because what your husband did or what your father did or what your partner did was wrong, and we're going to write a report around, and then she'd be like, oh, like can there be an FIR on that? And this is what I say, that this is where I feel that apart from all the other things, awareness is empowerment. Make women aware of their legal, social, political, civil rights. It is so important.
what's an FIR?
It's the first information report which is filed with the police once a cognizable incident.
And they don't want to do that.
They don't even know how. So because they have, most of the times, domestic violence is not considered cognizable. Because it's like, oh, you're in this marriage, happens, move on. Like nobody even, most of the times they don't even think that like if a husband beat her so much that he broke her hand or something, that it's a cognizable offense. And the women don't even know how to approach help, where to approach help, right? So it's just making them empowered. And it's just not about domestic violence, by the way. There's another important thing that I'd want to bring over here is the fact that in our culture, so many of the times a woman's inheritance is either taken up by her father or her brother without legally giving her what her rightful share. That keeps a woman from economic empowerment. And so many of the times women don't even know how to approach civil courts and get her inheritance, or what her right is in that inheritance. And even if she knows what the right is, like how much share should she be getting, where does she start the process of getting that inheritance? So that's why we also need to focus on telling women what their rights are and how to approach the public service delivery units to get those rights.
I totally agree. I wanted to ask about the law. Is the law from like top up? Is it strong enough?
Again, see, what I'm saying is that laws are there. Of course, we need to keep up with the changing times. All of that is there. But even the existing laws that are there are the women are kept away from accessing the justice system, and not just the criminal justice system, also the civil justice system. So if a woman gets into a divorce and she's going through a custody battle, it is so tough for the women of our country. Why? Because she's economically dependent on a man. It's an expensive process to go through the justice system. She's relying on someone else. So she's troubled in that regard. And again, like as I said, there's no one-stop solution to this problem, but we need to work on every front. And making her aware of her rights is another important thing that we need to be focusing on.
Yeah, so the laws are there, but the systems aren't there to allow people to properly enact those laws, and the access isn't there.
I think even the system, no, I would disagree with you on that. I think even the systems are there to quite an extent. But we need to make sure that a woman knows what to do. So we established a gender protection unit in Islamabad. And, this one time I just walked in and this lady was sitting there, and I asked her, "Why are you here? And what's your predicament? Let us help you." And she said that, she had come from like 200 miles away, and somebody had told her that the police had opened up this unit for women, and she can get help over there. And even though that our unit was basically facilitating women of who were survivors of gender-based violence or victims of that, and she had come in because she had no idea how to start a divorce proceeding with her husband. She had no idea where to start it, how to get custody of the children. So we helped her, we connected her to a pro bono lawyer. But I'm talking about, when you work on ground, you realize that there are so many things that you and I might take for granted, but these women would probably need to be empowered. So for example, you and I, it's perfectly, we don't even think twice before getting an ID card for a girl in our house, or we don't even think twice before getting a driving license for a girl child in our house, or a girl adult. But these women, most of them don't even have a bank account. They don't even have an ID card. Even if they have an ID card, they would never probably get a driver's license, or not know where to get a driver's license. So we also need to address these basic things which are going to help us empower these women. And in the narratives that are built around us, realizing what is required in that particular context is so important when you're deciding on policies. So what worked for Islamabad in terms of a public policy for gender equity or gender empowerment might not work in Nowshera, right? So context again is so important. So we might say that we are putting money in this particular area for gender empowerment, but if we're not addressing the very basics of it, we're not getting anywhere. If you're not getting her an ID card, which is required, if you're not getting her anything else which is required at that point, and we are thinking of something very superficial, we're not getting anywhere.
One thing I wanted to ask as well is, so let's say, for example, a woman makes a report against their husband because he's being abusive, and they bring charges against him as well. Maybe he gets arrested. I'm not sure exactly how it works. But then what's protecting her in the long term? Because what if then the family send her back into that same household and the man gets released back into the household as well? What systems are there in place to actually keep her safe in the long run?
Again, I think like the support for a survivor of gender-based violence is not there. In I mean, you can say that, we have these shelter homes, we have all of those things. Yes, we do. At times we are able to help most of the survivors get the immediate help that is required in terms of pro bono legal aid, in terms of shelter home. But we need to understand, going through the criminal justice system or the civil justice system, it takes a long time. So the arrangements that are in place are temporary. As I mentioned, it's expensive to go through the criminal justice system or the civil justice system. Where is that money coming from? Does the woman earn enough? Is she reliant on another man for that money? If she is, it's very unlikely that he would continue with taking her through courts for a long time. There's so many cases where there have been like severe cases of domestic violence and gender-based violence, where the women, after we have made the arrests, have come up to us and said that, can you ensure that there is reconciliation between me and my husband? My heart breaks. Oh. And she says that, my children have not changed clothes in 15 days. She's, like, he was put behind bars, or there was some sort of separation. He's the father. At the end of the day, he has to feed them. And that's the saddest thing. She puts, like, all of us, we would want justice. Justice is this feeling that everybody wants that. It can't be explained. It's not tangible. But then again, like, it is so close to every person. It's human nature to have justice, right? To earn that justice, to get that justice from the state. And so many women, my heart breaks. They would let go and forego of that because they see the reality, they see the needs, and for their children's sake, they just let go of that. And that's the saddest thing. And as I said, we also need to focus on getting, I think, like financial empowerment of women is so immensely important when we talk about gender-based violence. It is so important, I can't even like underscore it anymore. I mean, we need to have opportunities for women to be financially independent. For that, education is the first step. Then again, changing mindsets of those around the house, so that she can go out and work. She should not be reliant on any man for money. I have seen women go through so much, sustain that, like throughout their lives are wasted going through these processes of either going to the police or then going back to the husband, just because they're financially reliant on that man. So they stay in abusive marriages all their lives just because they can't provide for the children themselves or for themselves. Yep.
Yeah, it is truly heartbreaking. And living in the UK and countries like America, feminism has now almost got this stigma. It's seen as a negative thing by most people because it's been like almost hijacked by a group of people. But I feel like this is like a clear example of why feminism is so important in the broader world, because women are really struggling, like more than struggling. It can't be understated. And when you see things like this, like it's actually happening in the world. It's not just like a story that someone tells you and you read one or two articles, but it happens all the time, and it's really sad.
What advice would you give to someone who may be going through these abusive relationships on what steps they can take?
I think like there are two things that we need to understand in this. When you talk about, it's not easy for a survivor of gender-based violence to come out and report it. There's a lot of stigma and shame attached to it. By the way, that's not just for Pakistan, it's all around the world. I've seen that in the US as well. They said that the police over there told me that one of the highest unreported cases of domestic violence that they feel is from these big white neighborhoods where a white woman would not want a police car to pull up just because she doesn't want the neighbors to think that there's something wrong. So there's a lot of shame attached to it. So we can't just say that, why isn't she coming out and reporting? It's not that easy. It is never easy. So we need to understand that. And that's why, apart from somebody who's listening and going through this, it's the people around her who know it's happening that they need to provide the support. They need to stand up for her. They need to give her the courage.
And stop blaming her, because another thing that
Absolutely.
happens is like they blame the victim, or like, why did you allow that to happen to you, even though they clearly got forced into,
Yeah.
it's tragic.
Yeah. And that's for them to just give her the courage, stand with her, and again, tell those who are in deciding positions in that house, sadly, that, that can actually eventually lead to something very, very serious, which they would be regretting later on. So report. I think reporting saves lives. You have to report it. Report as much as you can. At least there should be some sort of intervention.
So you spoke about education being one of the solution. What exactly can be implemented in the education system in order to,
I think like one of the things that I see, as I just mentioned to you, there are things that probably the policy makers or the decision makers take for granted, which are actually required on ground. And in terms of education, when we say, I think like, there are certain great programs that are being run in Pakistan right now in terms of mentoring the girls about what they can do with their careers or what future holds for them. In regards to that, I think like there should be an awareness campaign around what women rights are. And tell them about what their legal rights are, what their political rights are, what their civil rights are, so that the women know when they're being wrong, that this is wrong. And then again, create ways for them to access help when required, or access these public institutes when help is required. And then finally, I think most importantly, it is that give them the courage. By opinion leaders need to come out and give women the courage that they need to come out, it's fine, it's okay, so that the narrative around victim blaming or shaming women with this comes to an end.
Yeah. I think it might also be very beneficial if there's some kind of course that guides women through, like, how does, if something bad happens to them, how do they then go about it? Like it's like a step solution.
But how do they even get access to the course in the first place?
I think
It's a part of like a curriculum. So like the teachers teach these things.
I think like you're right, Khushal. I mean, like this is so important that like as you have seen in the UK, like they educate the children about how to seek help when something goes wrong, or what is good touch or a bad touch, and how to report it, or who to tell if they go through something like that. I think that needs to be part of the curriculum in our country. That needs to be not an option but compulsory for certain standards of like, so if you're in fifth standard, you should know these particular things about how to seek help, when what is right from wrong when something happens to you, and how to report it. I think it is absolutely necessary. So instead of stigmatizing these things or saying that, oh, this is wrong, this is this, I think that needs to be made part of the curriculum by the government so that there is legitimacy to it.
Yeah, and also for men as well, I feel like even in men's education or exclusive men's schools, they need to be taught about these problems what women go through.
Yeah.
I want to touch on a point you brought up earlier as well. So you said your mother chose to raise a family instead of any career prospects. And you told us earlier on she was a gold medalist as well, which is like a massive achievement. So that must have been a very big deal for her. But you said that inspired you to then pursue a career. But do you think one is better than the other, or do you think both are options for someone to choose between?
It should be an option. That's my only response to this. It should be a complete option. When I say my mother chose that option, I don't think that she chose that option. I think the society or the people around her chose it for her. There's a huge difference between two. And if a woman wants to make home and stay home, and it's her own choice without any sort of social or cultural pressure, I think that's wonderful. But if a woman is made to do all of those things and the choice is being made for her, I think that's wrong.
Definitely. But again, it is very interesting because I think this is very prevalent or relevant now, not just in Pakistan, but in the US and the UK as well, because people are having a lot of conversations about the breakdown of the nuclear family, and people are attributing it to women pursuing careers more. So do you think there's any validity to that people are blaming so many of society's problems on like the breakdown of this family unit where the man makes the money, the woman works at home?
I mean, would you rather have a woman suffer through domestic violence and lack of choice than have a nuclear family and run her own home on her own terms and get a job or an education? I'd choose the latter. I mean, like for obvious reasons. It's not understanding the problems that women were facing. It's just like whitewashing whatever women had to go through for them to reach today at a stage where they're speaking for their rights.
Yeah.
I think that's as simple as that.
Yeah, and I think as well, if like, why does it have to be the woman who is responsible for raising the children? Like, if you want that nuclear family unit, surely it should be a combined effort, at least to some extent. Even if you're the type of person that is ambitious yourself, then you can't like force a woman to not work. You have to find someone you're compatible with, surely, someone who wants to like prioritize raising a family. You can't just like find a really ambitious woman and then tell her no, stay in the kitchen.
Yeah, like it makes no sense. Like find someone from the get-go, who's compatible with you. I totally agree with you, Wali.
I think like one of the things also that I'd want to mention over here is the fact that we have been keeping women from their potential far too long for now, right? So now when this has started happening, and when women are taking over jobs and all of that, it's not going down very well with patriarchy. And these narratives come up where they're like, oh, Now she's earning her own money, so she's raising her own family, so she's more likely to get divorced or walk out of a marriage. She is not, in reality, what it means is that she has decided not to suffer anymore, right?
Yes.
So if you look at it, if everybody is a rational person, so if a woman is going through a very hard marriage and she knows that that's not the life she wants to live and she just chooses to walk out of it, that does not mean the onus is on the women to keep that marriage intact. That means that she was probably going through a lot of trouble there and suffering through it, so she chose to come out of it, right? So that's how we need to see it.
Yeah. And what's to say that, let's say if we go like all anti-feminist, right? Men should be able to take care of them. Men should be the provider. Who's to say that we can trust some of these men to be then actually being a good husband and not domestically abuse them?
Yeah.
And then if they don't have a job, if they're not financially independent, like you said, then they can't do anything about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely
So I
agree.
think when people are all anti-feminist and they're like promoting this narrative that men should be providers and women should always stay in the kitchen, I think they need to take that into consideration. That just because we don't have that kind of patriarchy that we did in the past, where women even in the Western society were getting beaten up, then the suffragist movement came. That we can't go back there again.
Yeah.
If the resources are taken away, we could very well go back there again.
Yeah.
And it happens even here. Like there was a survey done that 97% of women have experienced some sort of harassment. So we can't underestimate this statistic. Like it's very much real.
It's a reality. That's so I mean, like this is what I'm talking about. And it again, like as I said, like, there's so many things involved when you talk about gender inequality. It's not just one thing. And the consequences of gender inequality, as you mentioned in the start of the conversation, that we need to tell people that there are so many benefits of gender equality, for the whole society, not just for women. And there are so many losses from this gender unequal world. And that's what we need to focus on. And to do that, I mean, we need to do a lot of things. We need to change mindsets. We need to change narratives. We need to work on ground. We need to provide the resources. So again, we need to have a holistic approach when we talk about these things.
And one thing I would like to tell men, sometimes when they hear the word inequality, they're talking about, men and women are not equal. Like, a man is more made for the labor jobs and, like the toughness, like how can you change biology? When we speak about equality, we're not talking about, like women should be like men. What we are saying, they have inherent value.
Yeah.
They should be just like how men are valued, how the systems are made around them that compensates for their weaknesses. We need to have systems that compensate for women's weaknesses.
Yes.
And also that encourages women's strength. Women come with so many strengths that men don't have, and they need to be utilized. And that's how you have a prosperous society.
And I completely see, we need to understand this, that this work world was designed for men by men. Right? So, most of the times, as you just mentioned, one of the arguments is that, she has to bear a child. And how can she do this job? Because then she will have children. And how can she do this? Because then, eventually she'll decide to have a child. But what we forget is that this world is designed for men, by men, this work world. And we have seen women even defy those arguments and narratives by bearing children, by doing tough jobs, by navigating this system, which was, as I mentioned, is designed for men. So when we talk about work, the call for, the need for, the cry for, I'd say, maternity leave was only raised a few years ago, like in the second wave of feminism, right? And for us to understand that the way the economics of a society work, they never took that into consideration, that the workforce could include women and would have children, tells you a lot about how the world is designed.
Yeah.
And when we talk about equality, we talk about equity. There are certain needs of men and there are certain needs of women. So you have to accommodate both.
This is why people just need to look deeper, especially in the Western societies, than just pay gap.
Yeah.
There's way more to it.
There's way more to it. It's
Yeah.
not just the pay gap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think if a lot more research is encouraged and understanding of women's world,
Yeah.
I think men would not be ignorant about these topics. I think it's the lack of education on such topics that is causing a huge issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's scary is though that there's the divide in this country and in America between men and women is at a crazy level now. There seems to be almost a hatred, at least online. In the real world, it's not so much, but on these social media apps, it is insane how many young men now have a genuine hatred for women online. And I think the divide seems to be getting even worse with all these new social media stars that are coming out. So how can we make people empathize with each other? Because truly, I don't think it's just that men don't understand women. I think now in these countries, women don't really understand men as well. So I think that's where these problems are coming for. And what can we do to bridge that divide and realize like we're all humans, we're just a little bit different?
I think, yeah, I completely agree. There's so much polarization when the debate of feminism is, discussed or is up for discussion. I think one of the things is that we need people to not just talk about superficial things around feminism, but we want them to understand what feminism is asking and make them understand, break down concepts, tell them that this is what this means. This is not what that means. And in social media, I think nowadays people just pick up one thing and make a huge deal out of it without understanding the context of that, right? So if a woman says that, as we were just mentioning, that empowering women through education and getting them, try for a job or work, if we discuss the benefits of that to the society, I think that is important. Like just not superficially taking up one thing and diving into a debate which has no end. In fact, understanding where we are coming from.
Yeah. Like for example, the pay gap, going back and forth forward where it exists or not.
Yeah.
It's we should dive deeper. What are the consequences of
Absolutely.
a world where women aren't getting the resources
Absolutely.
and like have a holistic picture? I think we can go back to what you said initially. The holistic picture is lacking.
And I think, again, as I said, it's not just about these things, but also what the concept holds, what the idea is, what equality, why equality itself, right? Like, what do we see in that? Why are we asking for it?
Yeah.
So all of those things, yeah.
I just quickly want to say that the same thing happens to Islam, any other ideology.
Absolutely. I mean, I would say one thing to that is that, again, we just discussed Hazrat Khadija's example.
Yeah.
So as we said that, dive deep into the issue and understand it before commenting on it is so important.
Yeah.
So when you look at Islam and, women's right, and even the right, like in Pakistan, there's this huge problem of honor killing. The huge problem of honor killing. According to Islam, if a woman decides to marry someone, she's free to do so. In fact, Islam encourages a woman to do that. So again, giving out the right picture, the true picture of what it actually means. And not having that and confusing it with something else leads to problems like these and issues like these, yeah.
Yeah, and it's exacerbated when most 99% of people in the country can't understand the language that the religion is written in.
Yeah. Amna, it was a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you.
So we are quite philosophical. He studied philosophy. He's currently studying philosophy. I've studied philosophy. So let's end it on this deep question.
Mm-hmm.
What would you want written on your tombstone?
I think I would want a Urdu sher, which is Mauj hai darya mein aur bairune darya kuch nahi.
What does that
What
mean?
does that mean?
That's for you to Google and check.
On that note, we need to learn Urdu.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. It was so nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, guys.
Thank you.